We've all heard about damp within properties, especially in coastal locations, but is it as bad as people say? Well, let's find out.
Heal Your Home with Jason Ratcliffe.
Coming up within this week's episode of Heal Your Home, we're going to be discussing damp or no damp. Is damp actually as bad as people think it is? And if so, how can we identify it and what can we do about it? Also, of course, we'll have a tenant top tip and a listener question.
Heal Your Home with Jason Ratcliffe.
So within this episode of Heal Your Home, we're looking at damp. Now, damp is a scary word. A lot of people, when they hear it, it can come across really significant, really severe, and something that is to run away from. But in older properties and coastal properties, sometimes this is unavoidable, but also it can be healthy. So if you're in a damp property, but you have a cob building or a stone building, actually that construction does require some moisture for what's called adhesion optimization. So basically all of that earth that is keeping it together needs that moisture to make sure that it stays structurally sound. Now this is something that a lot of people don't understand, and as soon as you put a damp meter up against a wall, it then just beeps and shoots all the way up to high damp. But actually, as long as you have the correct materials so it can breathe, then this is okay to a degree. Any property that is within a coastal environment, which typically is within about 50 miles of the coast, rule of thumb, is going to have condensation issues. So again, when you put damp or when you put a damp meter up against a wall, it is likely going to beep red. But that doesn't mean to say that you have penetrative rising damp or anything that is of concern. It's normally a telltale is when you have blistering or damp staining, or you have blooming, which is a discoloration around certain areas in your property, or you have what's called efflorescence, which is a salt that comes through. It's the minerals and salt that come through due to the moisture pushing its way through the material. So if you have these things, then absolutely there is something going on that you probably need to address. But if you don't have anything like that in place, then actually you're probably going to be absolutely fine. So we've covered older buildings, but what about newer buildings? Well, newer buildings, if they don't have any maintenance issues, can still have issues with people using those properties. So if you're not using extractor fans, opening windows, having mechanical ventilation systems running, basically ventilating and heating your property, you're likely going to get some form of condensation or damp. And that is really important to understand, because not everything is an expensive fix. And sometimes contractors or damp specialists, use the word loosely, will then capitalize on that, so they can actually then say, well, hold on a minute, yes, you have something here that's going to cost you more money than actually it really needs to. So it's always important to get a couple of people's opinions, especially if it is not something that you're experienced in. But of course, if you don't have your external facade of your property well maintained, so the outside skin, if your render etc is cracked, or you have pointing around windows or gutters are blocked, anything like that, that will allow water to ingress into your property some way or another. So actually leaving that will only make it more and more expensive and more stressful to actually remedy. What you want to do is be on top of these things. So if you identify anything that may be a cause, so damp, staining, blooming, blistering, all of these things that we've mentioned, get somebody in to check it out, because at that point it shouldn't be that expensive. But it's when you leave it and then it causes a lot more water ingress, a lot more damage to the construction, you start getting potential lintel failure, all the electrics start getting saturated, and then it becomes a really big can of worms that when you start looking into it can cause a big issue. But also, what can you do? Because obviously damp is not necessarily visible, and it's not necessarily going to be showing you the telltale signs. Well, condensation itself can lead to black spot mold, which in itself is it can lead to respiratory issues and all sorts of other nasties for occupants' health. So making sure you have well ventilated properties, making sure that you're using your extractor fans in your bathrooms appropriately, with a 20-minute runoff typically on your extractor fans, with the windows closed when you're using the facilities. That's really important, because if you open your windows as soon as you get out of the shower or when you're having a shower, the surface temperature of the inside of the walls drops significantly, so that condensation gets drawn to the inside of the walls rather than out the window. So a lot of people think, well, actually I've got a window, I don't need an extractor fan. That is very wrong. and you will end up, if you're not careful, with a lot of condensation in your home and a lot of black spot mold. So this is a quite an easy way of being able to improve and optimize your home. But as well as that, thermal deficiency, so anything that's not insulated properly will allow heat to escape from your home. But not just that, it will have cold spots, which means that as obviously heat escapes, then it will end up having colder areas in your home, which naturally the moisture in the air will attract to. Typically, this is why there's black spot mold and condensation around windows and things like that, because those are the areas that have what's called thermal bridging. So it's really important to understand these things. And what you can do is get a professional in that can do a thermographic survey. So basically that is an inspection of any heat escape that's coming out of the property. So it's things that your eyes won't necessarily tell you, or obvious signs from damp meter readings. So these are a few really basic points on damp and why it's important to identify them at a very early stage.
And now, a listener question for Heal Your Home.
So this is the time where we answer a listener question. We've got quite a few building up over Christmas, which is amazing. But the one that's the most relevant to this episode is Mike in Manchester. He has a 1960s bungalow, and he's noticed that obviously as the leaves have come off the trees nearby, they've started blocking gutters, which he went on holiday, unfortunately, for 3 weeks and come back, and it's caused quite a lot of water ingress coming into his property. What can he do about it, and what are the detrimental effects? Well, Mike, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, I see so many of this while going on site, and a lot of people message me regarding this sort of issue, because it is something that is so easy to remedy, but also so easy to miss. So first off, clear the gutters. Gutters are there to obviously get rid of the water that ends up on your roof and coming off your roof. So it's there. Its main job is to discharge, get rid of the water that then is around your roof, and to make sure that it gets away from the walls and the foundations of your property. But the problem is as leaves or debris starts blocking up the gutters, then it can't do that. So then it's called overtopping. So then it then overflows, and the only way it really can then go is back in over the top of your what's called your wall plate. So in essence, the junction between the roof structure and the main wall, and then it can seep into the construction. Now, if it's only been a few weeks, yes, obviously pretty excessive rainfall can cause water to ingress and noticeable water discoloration, things like that. I suggest clearing it out, allowing it to dry out, so you can use your dehumidifiers, ventilation, heating in the property. But to be honest with you, make sure that these things are checked regularly, because what can happen is anything all the way to significant things like lintel failure. So the structural supports above windows and doors, they can fail over time if they're long-term damp saturation. They're constantly in exposure to damp moisture. It can really have an effect and cost an awful lot of money to repair. But luckily, it seems if it's only been a few weeks, I don't think, obviously very difficult to say without looking at what the condition of the property is, etc. But based on that information, I really don't think there's going to be any future kind of long-term issues. I would maybe get a contractor in just to have a look at the condition of the lintels and the surrounding elements, just to make sure there's no hidden issues, especially as it's a slightly older property. So thank you, Mike, for listening, and I really appreciate you asking your question. I hope that helps.
Jason's Tenant Top Tip.
So this episode's Tenant Top Tip is all obviously about damp, but tenants do have the right to address damp issues within a property. Now, a landlord does have a responsibility, a legal and a moral responsibility, to make sure all tenanted properties are safe to live in, which also means all maintenance issues are addressed. So through from gutters to external facades, and making sure that there's adequate ventilation within a property so tenants can use it appropriately. But also it's really important that it is not just a landlord's obligation. Tenants must be open open and communicate with landlords, reporting issues as soon as they are found. But also tenants have a right to actually ask and expect a landlord to make sure that property they live in is safe and is healthy for them and is not going to impact them negatively in a health aspect and financial elements. So therefore it's not going to cost a fortune to heat the property, for example. So these are the things that you do have a voice for as a tenant. You do not need to be silent, but it also means that you do need to step up and actually do your part and communicate and liaise with your landlord as well, and also make sure you're using the property appropriately. If you have extractor fans, make sure you're using them, and all the other bits and pieces within your home, such as don't have open fish tanks because that can evaporate water, and don't dry clothes indoors. These sorts of things that your landlord or your letting agent should be able to guide you on. So these are little things that you can do, so please do not stay silent on this matter, and I hope that tenant top tip helps.
Heal Your Home with Jason Ratcliffe.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. It really does mean a lot to me and my team. Check out the website at homehealthexpert.co.uk for more information, to check out the services that we can help with for you and your family and improve your home's health, and also for the top tip guides that we have available for you. You can submit listener questions through our website and also by emailing our team at info@homehealthexpert.co.uk. We will try our absolute best to get round to your questions and help your family out to improve your home's health. Don't forget to subscribe to Heal Your Home wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube if you're watching along. I look forward to you joining me in the next episode of Heal Your Home. Your health, your future, it all starts here.